Welcome to Daddy Issues. Conversations with Dads. A podcast from Fathers and Families Center of Indianapolis, Indiana. Well, Larry and I today have, I think, a very interesting guest. Someone I'm looking forward to meeting and hearing from. Our guest is IMPD Deputy Chief Kendale Adams. So welcome to the show. Hello there.
Hello. How are you guys?
I want to introduce myself, Jason Acquisto. I know that you've been a friend of Larry's for a long time, and I want to thank you for your service to the city of Indianapolis and Marion County, first of all, and just to say thanks for taking a minute to be on our podcast, Daddy Issues.
I appreciate the opportunity.
So now, do I call you Lieutenant or Deputy Chief? What do you prefer?
Or just Kendale. That's what I usually like to go by.
Okay. I'm going to go Deputy Chief, dog. Okay.
And
I know what I've got here. Yeah.
but before we get into the discussion, we have a tradition of starting with a dad joke, and usually it's Jason who has it, but I've got one today.
Yep.
And the joke is, what cars do sheep drive?
What cars do sheep drive?
Yes.
I don't know.
Lamborghinis.
Yeah. Way to go, Dad.
Oh, that's a good one.
Talking about.
That's a good one.
Yes.
I'll have to use that one. I like that.
I could just see my kids just rolling their eyes at that.
Oh man, that's a real nice one. Good job,
I think
Dad.
I'm gonna go ahead and tell my daughters that and see how they react.
As Larry probably told you, this is a podcast we started just because I've got a 19-year-old, almost 20-year-old son, and he's an only child. And Larry's got a grandchild, and he's got a grown daughter, and then he's got two teenagers. Different situations, but still, we all go through this fatherhood thing, and it's the hardest job, but it's the most rewarding. We thought we'd just put this out, and keeping in the mission of Fathers and Family Center, this just made sense, and we jumped in and started a podcast.
That's awesome, Jason. I mean, It's funny you mentioned that, because I was just talking to a friend of mine, and we were lamenting on, as a dad. So I'm a girl dad, right? So I have three girls, an older one and then two younger ones. And so I was reflecting on, I've always admired dads or daughters that admire their dads, right? Mm-hmm. And you just wonder what goes into building. I mean, I've talked to friends of mine that are, 40 and 50, and, some of them still talk about their dad just in a light that you're like, what helped foster that kind of reverence for their dad? I'm like, man, I got to make sure that I'm doing my job as a father. Because I want my daughters to, have that kind of reverence for their parents, and to see that with older, I guess it's younger, like my girls, when I go in, they'll run to me, the younger ones. But, to see that when they're older and still see that kind of respect for their dad is just, it's really always good to see that.
For sure.
Now,
yeah, that's
the
just
good
having
stuff.
This
conversation.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's the good stuff, so.
Yeah, and every now and then, even my oldest one, again, married and all that, she'll remind me, she's, I'm still your daughter. I'm still your daughter. And I'm like, yeah, no, I get it. I understand. And so we have in our family 5 March birthdays, and this past, her birthday is March 13th. And on Facebook, she asked me a few days before, what am I getting for my birthday? And I said, I don't know. Ask your husband. It's like, Dad.
Right. Now, that is truth, Larry. That is truth.
But she really likes to remind. I took her out for her birthday, breakfast for her birthday. And she looked at me and she said, nobody, she's got actually, two kids, but she said, nobody told me that parenting was so hard. I said, you don't say.
So you know all about it.
Yeah, I know all about it. Absolutely. We have a mix of shows. Some of them are on the lighter side, some are on the heavier side. Today is a little bit heavy. We wanted to talk with you about the talk, right? In particular, that African American parents have with their children, especially their sons, about how to interact with law enforcement. And it's pretty much, unfortunately, always a timely topic. So that's setting for today. And just in general, can you to begin just talk about why and how you chose to get into law enforcement?
That's a great question, Larry. And I think, I chose to get into law enforcement. I mean, it wasn't a traditional route. I was at Ball State University in my senior year, preparing to graduate like most seniors. I had a job in sales, and I went, a buddy of mine said, "Hey, let's I got to go to this job fair to get some credits. So, why don't you go over there with me?" I said, "Yeah, that's cool." So we went over there and, we walked around probably for about 2 hours. And towards the end, right as we were probably just getting ready to leave out, there was an IPD recruiter. He was a tall black guy. And he said, "Hey," I don't know why he looked at me and didn't look at my friend, but he looked at me and said, "Hey, you ever thought about being the police?" And I looked at him and I said, "Hell no." And we ended up talking, just he and I ended up talking for like my buddy ended up going back to the dorms. Me and this guy ended up talking for 2 hours, and it was just, it just shed a different light on me. And, by the end of that, I said, I don't think he was necessarily recruiting me, but I think we were just having a conversation about life. And I just thought it was cool that this guy in uniform was so down to earth. And so I ended up applying, and here I am 25 years later. And so, I think I got into it because law enforcement is service. I mean, at the end of the day, it's service to something greater. And whether you're in the military, you play on a football team, you're part of a corporation, you build that around team, and a team builds towards something greater. And so I had this opportunity to really come back to the community that I grew up in and really try to make a difference. And so I chose this career because I wanted to make a difference 25 years ago. And although we've gone through some tough times as a profession, I'd probably still get in that same line and do it all over again.
Well, that's great. I never knew that story, so I appreciate you sharing that. I heard you on the radio the other day talking about the theft of these cars, these Hyundais and these Kias. You're always professional, but I could tell you were ticked off because you said we have to. I think your phrase you used was pivot. You wanted to hire some more officers to deal with more serious crimes, but you had to pivot to deal with this increase in these car thefts of these these cars that were easily stolen, Hyundais and Kias apparently. And it just kind of struck me. It was like, wow, I could tell. I was like, yeah, he's not happy about that, but
yeah, and it's you're right. I mean, it does bother me because police departments across the country are really judged on violent crime, and we're an agency of about 1,500, fully funded for 1,700. So our resources are really scarce, and so I really want my detectives that work in my division to focus on violent crime. But in order to address this issue for our community around Kia and Hyundai thefts, which is a big deal, right? I mean, because these cars are being sold to communities and members in our community that, really don't have the means to have a better car or get a very expensive alarm. They're being victimized. And again, I talked about in the press conference, but so it ticks me off from the perspective of these crimes are being committed because it's a fad, but it's
Mhm.
impacting so much in our community. Not to mention, small portion of that is the police, but it's really the victims. I mean, they're victimized by the insurance, they're victimized by the damage to the car. Again, these are people that don't have the financial means to go out and buy another car just like that.
Yeah,
And so
absolutely.
it really it bothers me that we have juveniles in our community. And I know we're probably going to get to this, but
Mhm.
these juveniles are attached to parents.
Yeah.
Their children are going out and creating mayhem for people, and it's unfortunate.
Very, very much so. And definitely, we want to spend the bulk of the time talking about, youth and so on. But just one more quick question that I actually think is relevant to that point. And that's this whole notion of being black and blue, right? Given the history of the law enforcement in general, its roots in slave catching and all of that. Talk a little bit about being an African American and choosing to go into a profession that hasn't always been very welcoming to us.
Yeah, I just think we have to acknowledge our past, my profession's past. We also have to acknowledge that as any profession, whether it's healthcare, whether it's legal, or whether it's law enforcement, we all have had a very checkered past when it comes to people of color. And today, we still have challenges. And I say we because I consider law enforcement a profession.
Mm-hmm.
I consider healthcare a profession. And we just read recently where the healthcare system is really focusing on equity. So I say all that to say that, all professions have had not so proud moments when it comes to people of color, but I think each one of those professions has grown. And I think that's what really defines a profession, is that we're able to learn from our mistakes to try to improve. And I'm proud to be a part of that. Just like any profession, I still think we have a lot of work to do, a lot of amends to make. But I think, holistically, we're trying to make the transformative changes that we need to make our community safer.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we've gotten it wrong with strategy, tactics, but I think we're getting much better at looking at data. I was just talking to a friend of mine today. When I started the job, we had 3 analysts,
Mm-hmm.
crime and intelligence, and would look at data. Today, we've got 25 in the police department. So we're looking at data, trying to use data to make informed decisions, being more transparent than we've ever been, trying to recruit people of color and people that don't look like us. I remember when I first came on, you couldn't have tattoos, right? Now we're at a point now where we're accepting of tattoos, and so certain tattoos. Let me be clear about certain tattoos. But I think to sum it up, Larry, I think I acknowledge that our past has not always been something that we're proud of.
Mm-hmm.
I acknowledge the harm that it's done, particularly to people of color. But I'm also proud to be a part of this profession because we are growing. We are improving. We are trying to be a better profession for all people.
That's so important. I'm glad you said that. Just want to then jump into, unless Jason had an additional question here.
I appreciate hearing that, and I also appreciate speaking with a high-ranking, decorated law enforcement officer who happens to be African American, who can discuss these questions, and how you feel about it, and out of the deepest part of who you are. I'm sure both of those huge parts of your personal and professional development. Your professional and personal development. So
awesome.
Appreciate that.
As so I'm a girl dad, but I've got 2 girls, but I also have a son, and he's 16. He's just started his junior year in high school, and I've told this story. In fact, I wrote about it in the Recorder, a couple of weeks ago, where he was. This is, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years ago. It's July. We're going to a family event, and my son, he's let's call it what he is. He's a nerd, which is cool. He's
That's a good thing.
It's a very good thing, right? I was a nerd jock or a jock nerd. It was fine, but he's just and he's a show choir and all that. But straight A, not only a straight A student, a straight A+ student, class president, all this stuff. He's number one in his class and all that. And so he's always been this very happy-go-lucky kid. But we were in a grocery store a few years ago, and he's kind of running around, doing his thing. And I noted, and this is on the east side of Indianapolis, Washington Street, and 3 officers came in. They're standing, kind of 3 abreast. It was very obvious that they were looking for someone. And I, immediately located my son and, get over here. And I said, stop, because he's running around. Or I said, stop running. He kind of froze, and he just got this very confused look on his face. Quickly got what we needed, went outside, to go to the car. And, he's, literally at this point, he's crying. He's like, what? He's trying to figure out what he did wrong. Right. And so I said, son, you didn't do anything wrong. Nothing that you did was wrong. And so now I'm calculating in my head, what do I say to him? Right. Because I don't really want to freak him out. Obviously the officers weren't looking for him, but so I as gently as I could, I tried to explain to him why he needed to stop running and on and on. So can you talk a little bit about that, which is our main topic today, how you approach the talk with young Black kids, especially males, and how you interact with law enforcement?
Larry, that is such a good question, and I think it's a very important question. I think the first thing we have to recognize is that as Larry, you and I were growing up, the internet was kind of coming on the scene, right? I mean, it was starting to grow. But when we were younger, I bring this up because we had to talk to our parents. I mean, there was no Google, right? There was no access to images and videos that sometimes are good and sometimes are bad.
Yeah.
But today it's a totally different world. Kids are not having conversation with parents. That's a lost art. They're texting. They're not inquisitive with parents because they can get it from Google or they can get it from YouTube. And then you add in social media. And the problem with that is kids are having access to that information, some bad, some good, at a much younger age and not able to process that. And because they don't have the skills to talk to parents, then they're just left to their own devices. So my point here is exactly what you talked about. We have to put down the devices. We have to have conversations with our children about, when you are engaged with law enforcement, we want you to be cooperative. This is not your opportunity to be, the lawyer or, what you've seen your friends do on YouTube, challenge the police. This is an opportunity for you to be cooperative. Now, if you have an officer you feel is not treating you right, I would say that most, if not every law enforcement agency has the ability to file a complaint. Most law enforcement agencies have body cam. So you can see these interactions with law enforcement to get your own take. But the message to our children has to be, your interaction, your engagement with law enforcement, we want you to be cooperative. We want you to, obviously know your rights. I mean, I don't want anyone to give away their rights. For example, if a police officer asks you, can I search your car? It's okay to say, well, I'd rather you not, or do you have a search warrant, or is there a reason? You can ask those questions, but be respectful. Don't amp things up. Try to amp things down. And that starts with cooperation. And I think as long as, well, I can't speak for every agency, but I know here in Indianapolis, with all of our officers having body cams, and hopefully dash cams here fairly soon.
Mm-hmm.
If we see activity that's not according to our policy, treating people with decency and respect, most police departments are I know Indianapolis will certainly deal with that. But what we can't deal with is, individuals who think they're lawyers, who want to argue with the police, want to get out of the car. Those are things we shouldn't do. I mean, it's not good for an adult. It's not good for our kids. And that's what I tell, I have no boys, as you guys heard, but I do a lot of mentoring. And that's exactly what I tell the young men. Put yourself in a police officer's shoe who doesn't know your son's a straight A student, who may just, we all have biases. We have to recognize that, whether it's police bias against people of color or whether it's people of color having biases against police. And so again, you have the problem in those engagements is you have people who don't know each other. And so that's why you have to teach all kids to ramp down, stay calm, and let the scenario play out. Don't let yourself get amped up.
You're listening to Daddy Issues. We'll be right back after a short break.
Insurance isn't one size fits all. That's why customers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years now. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they'll show you options that fit your budget. So whether you're picking out your first policy or just looking for something that works better for you and your family, they make it easy to see your options. Visit Progressive.com. Find a rate that works for you with the Name Your Price tool. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Your day moves fast. Your news should too. That's why there's a new and improved Wish TV app bringing you more local news, breaking alerts, live streaming, weather forecast, radar, and Indiana sports all in one place. Customize your news feed to see the stories that matter most to you and get the information you need when you need it. Download the new and improved Wish TV app today on iOS or Android and take News 8 with you everywhere.
And now, back to Daddy Issues.
I completely, understand that. And just, with fathers and families, one of the things that we do in our classes is we actually bring in an officer. He's in plain clothes. The guys don't know that he's an officer. He's just kind of in there mixing and mingling. And then we reveal that he is, in fact, a police officer. And that, his number one goal is simply to go home at night. That's all he wants to do, right? Go home to his family at night. And so it's an opportunity to begin to kind of break down some of those walls and all that. However, to your earlier point, we juxtapose that situation with, some of the videos and everything that we see, whether it's body cam or somebody's cell phone or whatever, that really in many instances makes it difficult for that trust to be there. Just another personal example. Then I'm going to ask Jason to jump in. Tamir Rice, right? I will never forget after that incident, the Christmas after, I was in Walmart, and trying to figure out what to buy for my kids and all that. My son was really young at that point, and I'll never forget this. I was in the aisle that had like the Nerf guns and all that. And I stood there and I froze and literally started crying. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? I was like, I said, I will never, and I never have from that point on. I said, I will never buy my son any kind of toy gun. It could be the brightest orange or yellow, obviously not a real weapon. But I said, I cannot do that. It was such an emotional thing for me. But and obviously that was a national, probably international story. But when we see those kinds of things, it really has quite an impact. I don't know, Jason, you wanted to jump in there.
Yeah, I do understand that too. I mean, obviously, there's a difference between my experience as a white father raising a white son and Larry's experience as a black man father raising a son who is black. When those moments come about, for you, you think, what do I do now? I imagine, Larry, nobody came to you when your son was born and said, there's going to come a day when you'll need to teach him how to behave around law enforcement, and so he can stay safe.
Mm-hmm.
But here we are. Okay. So obviously I want to understand better. I will tell you this. My oldest brother, is in law enforcement. He is chief deputy sheriff in Oldham County, Kentucky. He's been in law enforcement for much of his life. So I've grown up with law enforcement in my family, have an appreciation for that. But I also have empathy for those who have developed a distrust of law enforcement for whatever reason. And I want to deal with this in a healthy way because it can be a gray area, and my question really is, how can I understand it and do better? How can we as parents do better?
No, and I think, Jason, I mean, again, this goes back to, I think we have to acknowledge that, police officers are human and they have biases, right? Whether it be, they come from a community where there's not people of color, or, on the flip side of that, black police officers that raised in black communities and haven't been around, Caucasians. So, and the same for our community. There's this broad stroke that we paint across law enforcement because we see some of these images. But I'll say this, there are, I think last number I looked, almost 18,000 law enforcement agencies across the country. Most of them are really smaller than 50 or so officers. I think there's about 800,000 law enforcement officers. Indianapolis is unique because we are a fairly medium-sized police department. We're not obviously as big as like New York, who's got 30,000 cops. Chicago's got 3,000, something like that, cops. But we're right in that middle tier of agencies. So, I think what we have to do as law enforcement is recognize we have biases. We see a lot of bad things, right? And typically, Larry, just being honest, those are in black and brown communities. That's where the violence is. That's where the shootings are. That's where a lot of the issues are, front and center. Now, Indianapolis, for example, most IMPD works in urban environments. And so that's not shocking, but I'm saying you can see how if we don't train against those biases, officers can develop this bias that, a young black male walking down the street with a do-rag is a criminal. Because that's, we're constantly ingrained with these images every day. And so what we have to do as an agency and as a community is ensure that our police officers are getting the right kind of, implicit bias training, not only for the new recruits, but particularly for the incumbent officers, the officers that have been here for several years.
Right.
I think we have to continually train them because, just as I talked about the kids and the exposure, well, cops are people too. And so they're getting on TikTok and, Facebook and reading these messages about whether it be, the left side or the right side. They're reading these same images and developing their own thought process. And so it's very easy for an officer to then get in a police car and go out and think that, a certain area of the community is all bad. So we as an agency, we as a community have to train to that, to ensure that our officers are, mental health is taken care of, implicit bias is taken care of. Very rarely do we see all and out racism. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, but that's a very overt action. And typically police departments are very quick to deal with that kind of behavior. Where we see, I think, to most people's point is the implicit bias, not the explicit bias, but the implicit bias that we develop, whether it's how we were raised or just the environments we work in. So I think we have to train to that, Larry, is my point. We have to continue to have conversations with our law enforcement agencies to make sure that not only we're getting the recruits, but we're getting the incumbent officers through modules that put them around people like you and I
Mhm.
to start to break down some of those barriers. Because, again, police officers are people. They go out
Mhm.
here, they work 8 hours, then they go back to environments that look like them, just
Mhm.
like mostly Black folk. We go
Right.
right back to environments that look like us. And so we have to train ourselves to get out of that cycle and get around people like, for example, you and Jason having that
Mhm.
relationship, having those tough conversations about what it is to be in Black America, what it is to be in white America. We have
Mhm.
to have those conversations, and we have to have those conversations. Officers have to have those conversations, and we have to drive that for our police department.
Well, and
Yeah.
you talked about training, which I think is just so crucial. Just like everybody else, the last several days I've been looking at this, situation out in Montgomery, Alabama. My column tomorrow that'll be in the Indianapolis Recorder is about that situation. One of the points that I raised, though, because I thought it was really, really important to do that as an encouragement, was how the Montgomery Police Department handled that situation. I thought they did an outstanding job. Didn't draw the gun. Now you have a situation where people are fighting. It's they're on the scene. They probably didn't understand how it all started initially and all that, but they were so professional. They arrested people they had to arrest, black and white, whatever. At least they detained. You can see that on the video if you kind of watch the extended versions of that. And so one of the things I want to emphasize. I mean, you know this, but the issue with African Americans is that the overwhelming majority of us are not anti-police. We're anti-police brutality, and for a lot of people, they can't separate that in their minds. Right? It's like, we had an incident last week at my organization, and thank God that this is rare. Called IMPD. 3 officers eventually showed up. 2 white officers, 1 black officer. They handled the situation very professional. Could not have been more pleased, shook each one of their hands, and so on, and thanked them for coming and handling the situation that we had. And so it's not so. So my point is, it is sometimes difficult because we see a lot of incidents over and over again on TV or the internet and all of that. Most of the interactions are going to be positive, and I think that the training is so crucial in that. To your point, we all have implicit biases regardless, but that I think that training is so crucial, beginning in the academy. I mean, Jason, I didn't know if you had anything to add to that.
I appreciate knowing that there is an ongoing effort to equip everyone. Like you said, it's not just new recruits coming out of the academy. Okay, we've identified your implicit bias and dealt with it. Now, here you go. Here's badge. Go get him, Tiger. But it's also the veterans where you think, hey, we might not have done the best with this when you first came through. We have more knowledge now. We have more understanding, more tools, understanding what's important, the human psyche, the implicit bias, and how to prepare. I think it's important. I love that it's a continuing education process.
Yeah. Just to give you an example, like, a medical student has 5 years of almost 4 or 5 years of residency, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a profession. Mm-hmm. Aviation has, I think the last time I looked at it, I mean, it's over like 13,000 hours of flight,
mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Our police officers who are, can lawfully take life has 26 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And then about another year of we call it field training officers. So probably another, it's probably about 16 weeks of field training. And then they're on probation for a year. And then we're mandated by the state to do, I think it's 24 hours of continual education. And 16 hours of that is use of force. And then the other, 8 hours, can be broken up with some different topics such as mental health or implicit bias. Mm-hmm. So my point is, in some countries, being a police officer takes them 3 years. They do a couple years of, what I call book education, and then they take a year, and then they're on the street. And so, my point is, our training for law enforcement is very skimpy. Now, part of that is because we're trying to get police officers on the street. We got to have some boots on the ground and take calls.
Mhm.
But I do think, and we're starting to have conversations internally about, okay, so we have 24, 26 weeks with these recruits. Maybe we need to really bring in some, a curriculum designer, right, with some civilian experience, because the folks designing our curriculum now are mostly cops. They have a state kind of outline that they have to follow, but then they're filling in the gaps with things that they think are relevant, which has worked ever since I've been on 25 years ago. But some agencies are looking at bringing in an academia to the police training to really give that limited time we have, give us the best bang for our buck. And so we're starting to look at some of those programs across the country. But all in all, my point is we don't have enough training for law enforcement, and we have to continue to stress train. Now, again, we got to balance that with getting guys on the street, and then once they're on the street, taking radio runs. But we've got to take a serious look at our training, because that's where it all goes back to.
And you mentioned you're about 200 officers short of the budget that you have, right? And so what are you all trying to do to increase those numbers?
Oh man, I mean, hopefully you've seen our commercials. Hopefully you've seen us on Facebook, social media. We're trying all those avenues. We've gone to historically Black colleges. We go to military bases, both locally and abroad. I think we're trying, but I think one of the things that we're seeing with recruiting, it's not like when I came on, there were 1,500 people applying for 50 slots. Now you may get 1,000. And then of course, when you whittle that down, you're going to end up with less than 50 people in a class. So, I think, one of the things that our recruiters, when I talk to them, one of the things they tell me is it's about relationships. It's about so for the Caucasian, we're always going to get a large population of them. Our police department is 80% white male, 80%. So they're always coming. They're always attracted to law enforcement. But for the people of color, LGBTQ community, those take relationships. Build, you can't just say, hey, fill out this application. It takes, hey, like that guy did with me 25 years ago. It may take us going out, having coffee, telling them about the benefits of the job. And so that's what we're finding we're having to do with the Black and brown community, is really build relationships. And that takes time. That takes more recruiters. So we're really looking at, how can we have a PAR program, which is our physical agility readiness program. So, a lot of people who, particularly Black and brown females, have never gone through a police physical agility exam. So we have a practical every Tuesday. We meet with whoever wants to come out. I think it's at 7:00, and we do the parts of the physical agility so that when they come apply, they're better prepared. Because the physical agility is a state mandated course that they have to pass. It's not something that Indianapolis makes up. So my point is, it's those kind of creative things we're going to have to continue to do, in addition to what we're already doing by going to schools, athletes, and alike.
Deputy Chief Adams, could I ask you a question? Do you think that Larry could pass that physical? Physical, what is it? Aptitude and readiness. Oh, I didn't hear.
I think he'd give a good run for sure, Jason. I think he can make it.
He's in pretty good shape for an older man.
Yes.
But yeah.
So
so good. Yeah. So I was going to ask you, what is one, if you had to just gut level this, don't craft a statement, but what is just one thing that you would like for young Black and brown men, especially, to understand better about law enforcement?
Yeah, great question, Jason. I think I would like them to understand that we are people. Behind this uniform, behind this badge, we're people. We get scared, we get happy, we get excited. And, just like Larry said a few minutes ago, we want to go home. We want to go home to our families too. And so I think sometimes we look at people like me in a badge uniform and they say, well, he doesn't have emotion. When I see some of the incidents that I've seen across the country between law enforcement and community, that hurts. And I want people to know that I hurt when, when anyone in our community dies at the hands of law enforcement, but also hurt for law enforcement when, I see officers that are killed. Here we have Brianna Leaf just a couple years ago, serving her community, went on a domestic and, an individual shot through the door and shot her in the head. And so she passed. And so, I guess what I want people to understand is that, at the end of the day, we're people, and a lot of us live in this community. And we hurt, we have, when we see some of these scenes, we're really out here to try to help. But at the core of it, I want people to understand we're scared too. I mean, there are times when you pull over a car, you don't know who it is, black or white. Police officers are scared, particularly in a more violent society than we live in today. I think, we talked about it earlier, but the advent of social media and being able to play video games and run over people and shoot people with blood, and you get back up and you're running again. Well, I mean, that plays into some of what we're seeing in our society of being just a more violent society. So I say that to say that police officers are scared. I mean, that's a reality, but we still have a job to do. We're the ones that are running towards the gunfire. I just want people to understand that, at the end of the day, we're people.
I had to. My laptop was about to die, so I had to grab my my charger and plug in. So, two quick things. First of all, yes, I would pass that test with flying colors.
I mean, look, just being honest here. I don't know.
I think you would.
No doubt about that.
50 years old.
And it's funny. I went to Long's Bakery a couple of weeks ago. It'd been a long time since I'd been there, and
were they hot? Were they hot?
They were not hot. They were not
Come
hot,
on.
and I was not happy about that. Still good. I threw them in the microwave for about 10 seconds. But there was an officer. Alfred. He was in his car, and window rolled up, and all he was on his laptop. So I didn't say anything. But had he been inside, I would have. Yeah, I didn't know him, but still would have joked about him being there at Long's Bakery. Obviously, they deal a lot of cash there, so they, I understand why they typically have an officer out in front at Logs. You just, really appreciate your service and your dedication. Obviously, have a wonderful family, wonderful wife, and children. I think your oldest just got married not too long ago.
She did.
Always wonder. It's hard enough, to meet. Your bride's dad, but when he has a gun on his hip, that's a whole
and some handcuffs.
And some that's a whole other thing,
Yeah, a whole other ball game.
But Jason, I don't know if you had anything.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, who is your favorite TV cop of all time?
Tom Selleck.
From Blue Bloods?
He's the cop in Blue Bloods.
Blue Bloods, yeah, he's the chief.
Yeah, he's the commissioner. I just love him. I don't watch a lot of cop movies because they're they're dramatized, but that is one show that I really enjoy watching. If you had a chief like him, that'd be great. That'd be great.
Yeah, they do a great job of portraying him as the stern but wise patriarch figure there. Yeah.
Yes, right. I'd agree. Yep.
There, yeah. Well, hey, that's a great answer. I like it. Well, IMPD Deputy Chief Kendale Adams, thank you so much for spending some time in conversation with us. Really enjoyed it. Appreciate the candor, and the conversation's been great.
I just want to say, Jason, it's very nice to meet you. I see you got Louisville on there, so I spent some time. My oldest was born in Jeffersonville.
Right on the border.
Yeah, right on the border. And spent right before I got on the academy, I spent the summer down in Jeffersonville. And then I went to the University of Louisville for a program called SPI.
So was that part of the required police training, or was that something extra?
Yes, extra. So,
Okay.
in policing, you have a lot of leadership courses. There's like the FBI National Academy that
Right.
we have Senior Police Management Institute run by PERF, which is the Police Executive Research Forum.
Okay.
And then the other one is SPI, which is Southern Police Institute run by University of Louisville. Those are marks that you get if you're going to be in leadership. Cities like to see those things. And so,
Oh, I see. Very nice.
but
Yeah.
for me, it's just been investing in the profession. But Larry, I just want to say, man, I've known you a long time, ever since first Free Will. I could not be more happy for you and where you landed. I think, man, you're going to do some great things. Obviously, you've done some great things professionally, and to be able to bring that to fathers and family is just really going to be able to take them to another level. And they couldn't have chosen a better guy. So,
well, man, I really appreciate that. Thank you, so much. Really, and, you're more than welcome to come over and visit any time. Sure, the guys would love to meet you and talk with you. And I know you have a lot of responsibilities and all that, but I appreciate that. And just know you're more than welcome over there anytime.
Yep, I will. I'm definitely going to get over there.
Thanks so much.
Okay,
really
appreciate you guys.
Thanks for listening to Daddy Issues. Be sure to connect with us on social media. Feel free to email us, dads@thedaddyissuespodcast.com. Daddy Issues is a podcast from the Fathers and Family Center of Indianapolis, Indiana. To learn more about the programs of Fathers and Family Center, visit fathersandfamilycenter.org.
Insurance isn't one size fits all. That's why customers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years now. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they'll show you options that fit your budget. So whether you're picking out your first policy or just looking for something that works better for you and your family, they make it easy to see your options. Visit Progressive.com. Find a rate that works for you with the Name Your Price tool. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.